The junior senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, this past Sunday, an editorial by the New York Times titled "In the Wake of Fukushima" noted that if nuclear power is to have a future in this country, Americans should have confidence that regulators and the industry are learning the lessons of Fukushima and are taking all steps necessary to ensure safety. Following the events at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant in March, it's clear that maintaining America's confidence in the safety of our nuclear reactors is paramount. The disaster at Fukushima should not lead to a freeze of the nuclear industry. Instead, it should be an opportunity to upgrade the safety of our nuclear fleet. Both industry and the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission assure us that currently there is no immediate threat to the operation of our nuclear plants. Nuclear power is especially important to my home state of Illinois, where nearly half of all electricity in the state is nuclear. With 11 of 104 nuclear power plants and stations in our state, we have more reactors than any other state in the Union. In the near term, it's my hope that nuclear regulators and the industry will take actions necessary to increase safety measures and integrate emergency operating procedures. Furthermore, nuclear plants should swiftly implement sensible measures to increase flood protections, enhance containment venting capabilities, install remote monitoring controls of spent fuel pool conditions, and upgrade the ability to cope and maintain operations by a single station sustained for initially 8 hours and eventually up to 72 hours, utilizing pre-planned and pre-staged resources. Now, moving forward, one of our top priorities should be enhancing flood protection at reactors. Obviously, reactors for their cooling need to be near large bodies of water, subject to flood. Fukushima highlighted the need to take additional protections to guarantee that current backup pumps and generators are also protected against flood or other seismic events. The recent flooding on the Missouri River is a demonstration of the need for such enhancements. Although flood barriers and procedures have so far protected the Fort Calhoun nuclear plant in Nebraska, this is not the time to look away from making further efforts on protecting reactors from floods. One of the ringing lessons of the Fukushima disaster is the need for enhanced capabilities for nuclear operators to cope with prolonged power outages. Every U.S. nuclear plant should be able to cope with a prolonged loss of power for at least 8 hours for an initial period, and eventually 72 hours using only the resources on site, so that plant operators can utilize pre-planned and pre-staged equipment and muster other resources if necessary. We should be prepared for simultaneous events at multiple reactors on site and should be able to maintain key power functions in the face of varying circumstances, including debilitated infrastructure, a lack of communication, and especially the loss of on-site power. It's clear that operators' capability to cope with a prolonged loss of power was critical at Fukushima. We know that the tsunami hit the Fukushima Daiichi plant and wiped out all alternating power and backup power necessary to provide resources to the cooling pumps. This eventually caused overheating in both reactor vessels and cooling ponds. The ability to perform these critical functions and to monitor them, providing power to fans and pumps, and to remotely open and close vents and valves, the inability of the Japanese to perform these functions caused them to lose control of key areas or to maintain cooling to critical spent fuel ponds and reactor vessels. The Japanese also were unable to remotely monitor conditions, especially in their spent fuel pools, and struggled continuously to pump enough water into the reactors. Operators need to have proper instrumentation at far remote locations so that they can continue to understand what is happening in reactors and cooling ponds if an event occurs. Furthermore, we need to install proper venting upgrades on all reactors with the Mark II containment design This is an important step in preventing any kind of overpressurization or in reducing risk of operations that we saw so clearly at Fukushima. Now, in the United States, there are 23 reactors with the Mark I containment design. We have known since 1989 that there are flaws with the pressure containment system of the original Mark I design boiling water reactor. As a precaution, industry upgraded the Mark I containments with hardened vents to protect against excessive pressure in the containment. According to the NRC's very recent Task Force 90-day report, which examined the safety of nuclear power plants, the hardened vents are not universally installed on the Mark II containments inside the United States. The task force noted further that because the Mark II containments are only 25% larger than the volume of the Mark I, it's conceivable that the Mark II containments under a similar situation would suffer the same consequences as Units 1 through 4 at Fukushima. We should install hardened vents on all Mark II containment reactors and not allow any more time to pass before making deliberate improvements to address these safety concerns. Now, as we press forward with nuclear power generation, I believe that the NRC should also update our emergency planning zones. This is the evacuation zone that's pre-planned around every nuclear power plant. It seems prudent now, in the light of the experience at Fukushima, that we should expand the emergency planning zone to the Japanese radius of 20 kilometers or 12.5 miles around each nuclear reactor. These EPZs should also be updated with the latest 2010 census data of the number of Americans residing around these reactors. And the NRC should require enough radiation dose medication to handle at least 2 full EPC evacuations, if necessary. We also know that the spent fuel pools posed a serious threat to the safety of the site. Throughout the crises, Fukushima crews struggled to maintain water levels at the spent fuel pools to prevent an escape of uncontained radiation in the environment. For those of us that know a little bit about reactors, this was a surprise, because normally we are totally focused on what is happening inside the reactor. But at Fukushima, as much attention had to be paid on overheating in the spent fuel ponds. This warning should serve as a beginning of an effort for us to relook at the issue of spent fuel in the United States, especially spent fuel which is stored near our drinking water sources. We all know that 96% of all the fresh water in the United States is in the Great Lakes, and I am concerned that we store approximately 1,000 tons of highly radioactive spent nuclear fuel just 200 yards from the Lake Michigan shoreline at the now defunct Zion nuclear reactor. Any proposal to stop the permanent disposal of nuclear waste in Nevada is a proposal to continue storing highly radioactive nuclear fuel right next to America's source of 96% of its fresh water. I believe that we should now continue to reinvigorate the process of building the Yucca Mountain facility. Any proposal to not build Yucca is a proposal to pose a clear and present long-term danger to the environmental future of the Great Lakes. The bottom line is that we should not let the lessons learned from the Fukushima disaster become a forgotten story. That the NRC Task Force and its 90-day report issued after the Fukushima disaster is a serious document that now should lead not just to further studies and consultant reports, but comprehensive action, like hardened vents, like making sure that we have remote monitoring of spent fuel ponds, that all reactors be able to operate first 8 and then 72 hours without outside power, and that we take the other measures to upgrade our safety, like expanding the EPZs. Tomorrow I will be testifying before the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and as the junior senator for the state of Illinois, the most nuclear state in America, I'll carry a strong message that nuclear power has a strong future in the United States, but one that should be going forward in light of the lessons of Fukushima. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.